Hello my fellow researchers, Jason here with another video, and in this video I'm going to be going over the McNemar's test. And the McNemar's test is another type of repeated measures test in which you're comparing the same group of individuals at time 1 versus time 2. Or you might be doing some kind of post study or a before after study, and in between you're going to be giving them some kind of treatment, and you're going to try and determine, does that treatment have an effect on the variable in question. But it's similar to the repeated measures t-test in that we are using the same group of participants before and after, but it's different from the repeated measures t-test because we're not comparing means, we're comparing frequency distributions. So what that looks like is, here's our question: are you depressed? And in our sample of 30 individuals, we ask them that question, and we get 25 of them say yes, and 5 of them say no. And then we give them a treatment, and then we ask them the same question, and here's our results after the treatment. So it's about half say yes and half say no. So clearly you'll say, okay, well, the treatment does work. The treatment had an effect. But we're going to do the McNemar's test to come up with a statistical conclusion. Basically, is this a significant difference? So what the data looks like, I'll just pull up the McNemar's test data. We have two variables, pre-treatment and post-treatment. And for the categories in each variable, we have yes and no. And that's for both, yes and no. And so our data, here's the data that I have in the drawing I just showed you. 25 individuals said yes, they were depressed before treatment, and then only 15 individuals said yes, they were depressed after the treatment. So it works, but we're going to do the test to see if this is a significant result. So I'm going to click on Analyze. I'm going to go down to Non-Parametric Tests, and I'm going to choose Related Samples. And here I'm going to click on Customize Analysis, and then I want you to choose the Fields tab. And you're going to throw in our two variables into the test fields box. And then you're going to click on Settings, choose Customize Tests, choose the McNemar's test, 2 samples, and then hit Define Success. And you're going to make sure you have first value found in data selected, hit OK, and we're good to run. And our output window will pop up. And it tells us in this first box here our null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is basically that the distribution between the categories is equal for both variables. Or in other words, the distribution between yes and no before the treatment should be the same as the distribution for yes and no after the treatment. And clearly it's not. Just look at our ratio, 5 to 1. Here, 25 said yes, 5 said no, and then here we have 1 to 1. So that's the null hypothesis, and you can see the decision is to reject the null hypothesis, because clearly there is a difference between before the treatment and after the treatment. And our test statistic, the value you're going to report is right here, 8.1, and you're going to also report the significance, which is 0.002. And you can come a little farther down here, and here you'll see again just the distribution, the frequency distribution before the treatment, before treatment, and then the frequency distribution after treatment, in case you wanted to report that in your table. Right here again we have similar in this sense. We're basically looking at the observed frequency for individuals who are coded as 0 and 0. And that's 15, and again just look at our data so you can see what 0 and 0 is coded as. It's 0 is yes. So 15 individuals said yes before and after, 5 individuals said no before and after, and then you can look at the difference in between. So that's the McNemar's test. It's pretty simple, pretty common as well. It's a non-parametric test, so you're pretty safe to do it if you're not using a random sample. And that's the end of my video, but one thing I'll mention here is that the repeated measures t-test is very similar. The only difference for the repeated measures t-test is that here we're comparing means before and after. So you're calculating the mean of the group before the treatment, and then you're calculating the mean of the group after the treatment, and you're coming up with the t-statistic. Whereas for our McNemar's test, we're comparing the frequency distribution before the treatment, and then you're comparing the frequency distribution after the treatment. And you're coming up with the test statistic. So if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. If not, stay tuned for my next video in this video series. Cheers.